You want to know what's the hardest part of making a review, especially for a video like this? It's not the editing or the research or even figuring out how to make it entertaining. The real hardest part in creating a review is the writing. Whether it be for an article or a video, the writing is the process where the thoughts and all the information you've gathered in your mind have to be translated into actual written words. It's the process that requires your brain to work the hardest. Of course, it's not just critics who have to face this, but it's a sentiment that all writers go through since the writing is what builds the foundation of either the message or the story they want to tell. But it can be particularly tricky to write and express thoughts on something that's outside of the writer's element, which in my case, I'm more into talking about animated films, but now I gotta do a live-action movie. However, today I was requested on Patreon to review something that will be more challenging than usual. Not only is this something that's out of my comfort zone, but it's honestly something I've never heard of before. Are people even familiar with the movie Wonderboys? It was a feature based on the 1995 book of the same name by Michael Chandon, where director Curtis Hanson decided to bring this story of a novelist struggling with life to the big screen in 2000. Although it's no big surprise that it never connected with the mainstream, since it was a box office bomb and not even a re-release several months later was able to save it. It wasn't the movie's own fault though. It did carry a pretty hefty budget of $55 million, and many stated that Paramount did a lazy job with the advertising. On the bright side, the movie did go well with the critics. Well, okay, maybe not massively praised, but it did manage to collect some decent reviews and some good attention during award season, including winning an Oscar and a Golden Globe for the Bob Dylan song Things Have Changed, and several nominations ranging from the actor's performances, best editing, and yes, best writing. So this left me a little stumped on what to do or how do I pull this review off. Well, guess the only way to truly know what I'm getting into is to see the movie myself. That's gonna be the only way I could answer my own question, what is Wonderboys about in the first place? Well, like I said, it's about a novelist having a hard time with putting his life in order. But more specifically, it's the story of Professor Grady Tripp, who went through the most insane weekend that would ultimately forever change his life, all while having one of his students and his editor join in on the adventure. In a way, the movie can be interpreted as a full-on character study, an entire analysis on Grady going through a complex character arc to find the one thing he's looking for in order to solve all his problems at once. At the start, while he seems fine working as a university professor, the guy has a lot of baggage in his life. He's going through a divorce, he's in love with the university's chancellor, who's already married to the chairman of the English department, and he just can't stop writing his latest novel. But things get even worse when one of his students, James Lear, hangs out with him and develop even more problems to deal with, like killing the chancellor's husband's dog and stealing a valuable jacket that was once worn by Marilyn Monroe. As a more character-driven movie, it's the kind where the actors have to take on more responsibility for carrying the film. And luckily, it is one of the feature's strengths. The characters did a great job in their respective roles to present a list of interesting characters that stand out with their personalities, but not exaggerated to keep them realistic. While they're all great, the standout performances are Michael Douglas taking the responsibility of Grady, Frances McDormand as Sarah, who's the chancellor stuck between the professor and her current husband, Tobey Maguire as the socially awkward James, and Robert Downey Jr. being his charismatic self that everyone knows and loves that works well in this picture.
Oh, Krabs, come on, will you? He's one of my students, for Christ's sakes. Besides, I'm not sure if he's,
He is, I'm sure. Take my word for it. I see myself in him.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
I know it's not the right Peter Parker, but I'll leave the audience to make their own Marvel reference. But a key factor in what makes the actors great in this is that they were able to work well together in order to help develop each other's characters. That's what makes Michael Douglas stand out the most, because he did a great job in simultaneously build up his character to rediscover his purpose and help out others along the way, especially with his relationship with his student James. In a way, it's almost like this Rain Man style bond where Grady is taking care of this kid whose social skills are almost non-existent and makes him a bit unpredictable, but there is that side of him that Grady sees that he is a genius and has the potential to be the next great American author.
I don't know. You just keep acting like a goddamn spook all the time, James.
Well, I guess that explains why all the kids in workshop hate me.
It's thanks to the combination of the writing and the actors that make them so fascinating and help the movie become engaging to see how these characters solve their problems and what will happen to them in life. It is admirable to see these talents being put to good use, but I can't really say that I've witnessed a masterpiece here. I get the idea of what this movie is trying to do, but just like writers, this one should have had an editor to take a look and help out on fixing some stuff, especially with the tone. Yes, if I gotta point out one serious flaw with the movie, it's that it's not the best with how it handled being a comedy drama. Don't get me wrong, the dramatic parts are great and they help out the most with developing the characters. But then the comedy steps in and this is where it gets as messy as Grady's life. It's fine that the gags are not laugh-out-loud funny, and there are some moments that do give out some good chuckles, especially with Robert Downey Jr. delivering his signature wit to lighten up the mood. However, there are some times where it often feels like the movie is building up this sitcom-style scenario, resulting in kinda out-of-place cheesy moments. But I will say that they wouldn't be as bad if it weren't for the score hamming the situation up. Another issue I want to bring up is that, again, like Grady, it doesn't have itself in order. For the most part, when Grady and James are together, the film has a smooth flow and knows where it's going. But in the first act, it spends its time bringing up so many elements and people at once that it makes it hard to track down what is important to know regarding what was established. And everything happened so fast that I thought I was more than halfway through the feature, but it turned out I was only 30 minutes in. But I can't actually explain my sentiments on that. I'll admit that throughout the feature, the hardest thing to do was to figure out what is the point of the story. Yes, it established the characters, it's telling us what's going on, but it doesn't really express what this is all about. Like, what is the story of Grady? It's obviously not a slice of life kind of film, there is a narrative going on, but it's tough to figure out the whole point in all this. What is he even looking for with all his problems? All we know is that he's a novelist that's way past his prime and writing a book that he doesn't even know what it's about.
If you didn't know what it was about, why were you writing it?
I couldn't stop.
And then by the end of the film, it hit me. I found the point of the story. Believe it or not, it's exactly that. It's a story about finding a point to the story. Yes, some could say that the plot is a bit of a jumbled up mess, but that's because Grady's life is a jumbled up mess. He can't find a way to give a proper ending to his story and has to deal with numerous of problems at the same time. But through the help of others, he slowly discovers what is important in his life and finds the right words to say so that what he wants becomes progressively clear, thus having the movie to gradually unravel what it's been trying to do this whole time. Just like when he's trying to write his novel, this is about a writer trying to find his story. And it's funny because I've seen a lot of movies that are said to be tailor-made for a specific group in the filmmaking process. You know, the kind that people would say that it's an actor's movie or an animator's movie or something like that. But in this case, the best way to describe this film is that this is a writer's movie. Weird, I know, but this really does feel like a movie for writers, by writers. A tale of self-discovery told through the lens of a man with a lot of baggage in his life who is way past his prime, hoping to find that satisfying ending to his story. Wonderboys is a pretty solid feature where it may take some time to get into and needed some work on the tone, but it does have a great cast portraying some engagingly interesting characters, and, of course, some pretty good and clever writing. While not the most fascinating feature, it is simple in its filmmaking craftsmanship that did manage to work well with the materials it had. I recommend checking it out to see some familiar actors play out in an interesting story, but this is a must-watch for writers and aspiring writers as a film that's specifically made for them. If I put a rating on this, I'd go with an 8 out of 10. It's probably a niche movie, but it's a well-crafted niche movie. In a way, it really does reflect well on how the life of a writer can be. Okay, it's an exaggerated example, especially with a guy like Grady, who's just down on his luck, but it does show the troubles of finding the right words to say and how to give your story an ending that you'd be happy with and move on to the next. Rather it be working on a novel or a review like this, the writing is always the toughest process to go through. But at the same time, it is also the most satisfying when the process is done. Okay! Glad I got that done. Now let me just stop the movie, I don't need this. Now, how the fridge am I going to present this?
I think with the proper editorial guidance, this could be brilliant.